Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and we have a great, I think last year for the first time and a couple of times, and she's very interesting, comes from an amazing family and a great music background, and she's also been a host of a TV show, CMT, for, I think, since the early 2000s. Anyway, she's a lot of fun. Looking forward to talking to her. No blog this week. Charles needed the week off, so he's got the week off. So I do want to say at the very end of the show, 54 minutes or so is how long the show runs. I'm going to play a clip. Now, those of you who watch things on my YouTube channel, you've probably already seen it, or you may have seen it. It's back to my series of the listener encounters. And she's a very credible person, had an amazing sighting in Baltimore. And so I'm going to be playing that right at the very end of this show after I say goodbye to Katie. So without further ado, I shall bring Katie in. Welcome, Katie.
Hi, Martin. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. And everyone's going to, I know the first thing that's going to happen is everyone's going to say, now, what's that in her background? Is that Waldo? Is that
that's Little Big Benny. I've written 3 books about Little Benny.
Oh, that's who that is.
Yeah.
If you put a hat on him, he could almost pass for Waldo. But
yeah, I can see that.
And yes, right. I forgot about that. That's who that is. And so you've got a lot going on. You are one person that keeps yourself totally busy all the time.
I do. I'm always like, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I do. You know what? I do everything I enjoy. And the universe has hooked me up with, allowing me to make a living at doing so many things I enjoy, from the TV hosting work to writing books, the children's trilogy. We can talk about that later, to UFO stuff. This has been a lifelong passion for me. I became a realtor a couple of years ago, as you know.
Yeah.
Show you a property recently, which was such a thrill. Anytime I get to just hang out with a friend and I'm also working, that's just like really fun for me.
Right.
And I sing and I write and I'm just doing all the things I want to do. And somehow, the world provides, and I just am going to keep going that way. It may not be a recipe for success in a lot of people's eyes, but I do get bored easily. So I'm always juggling a lot of stuff, and that keeps me mentally stimulated.
Now, you also grew up with a famous father. So, and what a beautiful song he put out in the world.
Which one? I Like to Teach the World to Sing?
Yes.
I love that one.
I remember that since I was a little kid.
I know, the Coca-Cola jingle. It's such a blessing meeting people all over the world. And they're like, I sang that growing up. I learned that in my schoolroom. That's so sweet. I'm really proud of him. His name's Roger Cook. He's actually not so famous because he's a songwriter. Songwriters are usually behind the scenes. He was in a band in the 70s called Blue Mink in England, and he was really famous when I was really little.
I thought I detected an English accent.
With my dad or with me?
Yeah. With a little bit of your dad, with a little tiny bit of an accent. Yes.
Yes, very much. I was going to say, I'm the one like really American sounding person in my whole family. I'm kind of the black sheep. But he definitely still has his accent a little bit. I'm really proud of him. And I actually told my dad for the first time last summer about a lot of my paranormal and UFO experiences. I don't know why I'd never told him, even though he's my dad. I finally, bridged that subject with him, and he could not have been more open-minded, even had a couple interesting things to tell me. So that was really cool. Yeah, but I'm very, very proud of my dad. I'm glad you brought him up. He means a lot to me, and I'm actually going to work on a documentary about him because he's had a really interesting life. And I'm like, I've interviewed people for 2 decades, and I've never interviewed my dad. That's kind of weird. So I'm going to fix that.
You've interviewed everybody that you can almost think of. I mean, when it comes to Dolly Parton and I mean, was it Shania? Shania? Who's someone I have a hard time with a name, but you were doing that recently, right?
Yeah, I just went to LA a couple of weeks ago. Well, actually, it was mid-January. God, this year's already going by so fast. I got to talk to her in LA a few weeks ago because she has a new album out. That was really fun to talk to her. Yeah. I actually, I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but I actually asked her years ago if she had ever seen a UFO, and I don't think her people were very pleased with me for asking that, but she played along. She was cool. She's like, I can get into that topic.
You did ask Willie Nelson too.
I did ask Willie. You can ask anything to Willie.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, I played that clip at
Now, if only you asked Obama when you interviewed him.
I did not get to talk to Obama about UFOs,
Yeah.
um, but great. He was a
Yeah.
great person to work with. I really loved that day.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet. I bet. So let's hear how you got involved in the UFO topic. What started it with you?
Well, I mean, I don't even know when it started because it's been lifelong. I I always say I didn't pick paranormal, it picked me. And I tend to use paranormal as this catch-all term. I've fit ufology under that too. A lot of people go, no, it's two separate things, but it's ufology is not necessarily normal, right? So I throw it under that umbrella. I had a lot of OBEs as a kid, out of body experiences. I didn't know what they were. I just thought I could fly. And these were not dreams at all. And I would try to tell everybody that would listen to me. I'm talking 3, 4 years old, wanting to talk to other people about their flying experiences. And that was probably the first time I understood you can't just talk openly about anything that happens to you. You know, it was like, oh, well, that's cute. I have interesting dreams too. No, these aren't dreams. And I remember being angry. I didn't understand why everybody else wasn't just, going, yeah, I fly too. How do you do it? Do you use your hands? It's all in your head. So I started just internalizing a lot of these odd experiences I was having as a kid. I don't know that I would call it sleepwalking, but I always woke up in other parts of the house and just weird memories of how I got there, a lot of stuff disjointed. And so as I got older, plus side note, I'm a child of the 70s. So I grew up on Star Wars and Star Trek and all of that. And whole family was kind of sci-fi nerdy that way. So
Hmm.
as I got older and really got into reading books, I just found myself always I wasn't really so into fiction. At a really young age, started going for anything I could find about UFOs. Um, and just started, it's way before the internet. I'm 52. So, it was just
Mhm.
go to the library and see what you can check out or order stuff out of catalogs. Then when I was old enough to start driving, I started going to UFO conferences, and it was a pretty lonely experience, to be honest with you. I didn't really know who to talk to about it. I was very glad MUFON existed, you know.
Yeah, someone just has a comment here you can see down below. Miss hearing
Oh,
you on the MUFON podcast. Yeah.
oh, I miss being there. Maybe I can jump on as a guest sometime. I got really busy trying to launch this real estate career, and I'm trying to get my daughter into college right now. It's like my life just went, ah.
Oh, yes.
So
Yeah.
And so it was just really tough to do it all, but I miss them and I love them, and I'm so glad you guys are still watching that show because we need that show. It's entertaining, and of course, they have amazing guests just like you do, Martin. But yeah, so I got obsessed with this topic and it's never stopped. And I slowly, I guess, through going to all these UFO conferences, I think the first one I went to was like all the way out in Laramie. Remember Dr. Leo Sprinkle?
Leo Sprinkle.
Yeah,
Yes.
spent
Yeah.
time out there with Leo, and that's where I first met Dolores Cannon, and these people changed my life. Reading Whitley Strieber's Communion changed my life. All of a sudden I was like, I'm not the only one that's seen and felt this weird stuff, and I started just slowly finding my tribe, I guess, and that kind of brings us up to date, doing some work with MUFON and getting to co-host the podcast. I had my own podcast for a little while, Wide Open Wonders, but again, it's a time thing.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
such a passion, and I don't have enough hours in the day. So,
Yeah. Yeah. You really have a full plate.
yeah,
So,
I do it to
have
myself.
someone is going to ask me if I don't, and I like your cup too. Is that an alien on your cup?
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, it looks kind of backwards. I got this out in Vegas. Look, you can spin the little alien head.
So, have you yourself ever had what you would consider a UFO sighting?
I've never seen like a metallic craft in the sky. I have had a couple weird things I've seen that I can't explain. And now I see satellites all the time. The first couple ones I was like, oh, it's something. And then I realized what I was seeing. Angelia Shear helped a lot with that. She was, I think, 2019 MUFON Investigator of the Year. She was my mentor. And she really helped me spot the satellites and know the difference. I saw
Is
something
this is a good.
that
Yeah.
that's my baby. I
Yeah.
love her
And
so much.
I think I thought I brought up another. Yeah, you sent me another picture too.
She
I'll
was
find
so
it.
wonderful. She helped me really start to identify things in the sky. And I think the most unusual thing I've seen, and I would love your listeners to tell me if they've ever seen anything like this, because I got nothing on this one. I was on an investigation with Angelia. This out in the countryside, about an hour out of Nashville. This guy had a pool. He had seen all kinds of weird stuff in the sky. He was at another part of the property with somebody else they were investigating over there. Angelia and I were by the pool, and we were lying back on those like anti-gravity chairs. So I think she actually fell asleep next to me, which is funny. I think I heard her snoring at one point. It was late at night, and I'm just looking up, and I see right over my head. I mean, I'm not very good when I look at the sky estimating how high something is. I think that's really difficult if you don't have another object nearby. But I would say kind of like firework height. I mean, it's nothing I could have thrown a ball at. It was pretty high, but it was not a planet. Not, it looked like if you took a piece of chalk and broke it about an inch long, and on a blackboard used the side of it, so not the sharp side to make a fine line, but the soft side, and you just made like this snaky shape. And I just watched it start from nothing and make this shape right over my head. And then it just faded out. There was no sound. There were no fireworks going on anywhere. Have you ever even heard of anything like that? I keep bringing that story up because I just am dying for someone to go, I know exactly what that is.
It wouldn't have been any type of weather phenomenon or anything. Was it a perfectly clear sky?
Perfectly clear.
Yeah.
I mean, no cloud. It was an awesome night for investigating. I mean, it was just bizarre. So, and I did see something actually right over my house that came over. It was a little bit like a satellite, because you know how they're real bright and then all of a sudden they seem to go away. And that's, I think, them just turning and no longer reflecting the light. But this was so low. This was like airplane height. Planes fly over our house all the time. This was like silent and airplane height. This, I almost feel like I could have thrown something at it. It was so low. I couldn't have thrown something at it. That's an exaggeration, but it was really low, not a satellite. I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, and it's better not to, jump to conclusions. I mean, you're better off just saying just the way you are, describing just the way you are. Because I've been very careful myself, because I feel like I do this show and I have to be careful. And like when I thought I saw something, and I sent it right to Mark D'Antonio, and he said, well, the old saying, it walks like a duck, it talks like a duck. Well, he said it walks like a drone. So it most likely a drone. But I couldn't, I chased it down where it appeared to have landed, and there were, it didn't look like there was anyone around, but I don't know. But I'd rather say it was probably a drone and leave it at that, because I feel like, because I do the show and I just happen to have something unusual happen, I'm going to be real careful is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, when I was interviewing Jim Peniston years ago, I just said, it's got to be tempting sometimes to want to fill in those gaps in your story. It's like, don't do it. It's like, stick to the facts. And I really believe in that. So I don't know what I saw.
Well, that story, now that you're bringing it up, Rendlesham, boy, I'll tell you what, that's such a convoluted thing with all the different weird things that have happened, and the intra-fighting, between everyone. Not that they're really fighting, but there has been a lot of turmoil through the years with the witnesses and things.
Well, and sorry, were you done?
Yeah, I'm done. Yep.
I get excited and I'm like, oh, can I jump in? Angelia was real big on this. Human perception is everything. So you can have the same 3-4 people involved in an experience, in a sighting, an abduction even. They're not going to come away with the same feelings and the exact same story. It's great if they can perfectly corroborate each other, but then things get weird. That's just part of this phenomenon. It's one of the most frustrating parts of it, because we all want hard data, but people don't act normal in the middle of these weird encounters. I mean, how many times have you talked to, an experiencer, and they're like, and then the weirdest thing happened. I came in and my dog was like on stun. It should have been barking. Then I went upstairs and my mother was just sitting there staring at the TV, like hours had passed and she didn't know. Everybody acted weird. Then we all just fell asleep. And yet this totally bizarre thing just took place and everybody's acting weird. So I bring that up to say it's one of the frustrating things about this phenomenon is when people start attacking each other, because, and I even like to talk about like experiencer shaming, well, that happened to you. It was negative just because you have a negative attitude about aliens, or, that's just what you thought was going to happen. Let's not shame each other. I was not there when you had an experience. You were not in my bedroom at 3 a.m. when that happened. I've had good and bad experiences. We can talk about that, So I just I think we need to not turn on each other. Just keep putting the data out there, keep talking about the facts. Don't try to fill in the gaps too much, as frustrating as that can be for even a
Yeah.
listener on a show like this. I agree with you 100%. Just put the facts out there.
It's really something, though, what you just touched on right there is, and I've heard it countless times, is that two people are observing the same thing. And I've even had people say that there was someone like right beside them that didn't even see it, and they were like staring at it. It was like right there. I mean, that's when you go to the part where maybe they are manifesting it in their mind somewhat or whatever. But I mean, they'll have different experiences, or they'll both have this amazing encounter, and then they said, "Yeah, but we didn't talk about it. That we never talked about it again."
Yeah. What
And
is
it's
that?
like, I mean, it's just it does the things that don't make any sense. Almost,
There's
I mean,
yes.
it seems to happen a lot.
There's so much that doesn't make sense and it's frustrating, but that frustration can turn into everybody attacking each other. And that's what we shouldn't do. I think everybody just needs to keep, putting the facts out there. Don't attack.
Yeah,
Because it
yeah,
is weird. There's no explanation sometimes for somebody's behavior. And is that manipulation from whatever these beings are that we're, interacting with? Are they doing that to us on purpose? Or is it something within ourselves? We're protecting ourselves? Is there a level of shock that is just making us act weird? All of the above?
yeah,
No.
yeah. I know I think as I've gone along in this whole thing, it seems like there's just more and more questions, and less answers. And
Yeah.
one of the things that comes up, and I see you sent me into some notes of things that you have interest in, and one of the things you talk about is about time, and there is a time element to this, and that's come up lately on my show a couple of times.
Yeah.
But there's some type of there's a time thing in this whole thing, a time dilation or time whatever it is, and maybe that has to do with the way they get here, wherever they're coming from. I don't know.
I think
No.
so. Yeah, I wanna say Whitley Strieber might be the first person that put it into my head that time travel could be involved, that they could even be us from the future coming back. And then I've always thought about that, but didn't really have anything to add to it, and then reading Michael Masters'
Oh
book,
yes, yeah,
Identified Flying Objects, I think is the name of it. I loved it.
yeah,
He's mixing all this science and anthropology, and it makes a lot of sense, but I don't think it's the only answer, and I think that's another thing that we all have to keep in mind is just be patient and go, even if we get the answer for one being that could be visiting us, I still don't think it's the whole picture. I mean, look how many different species of animals and how
yeah,
different all of us humans are on Earth. I mean, I look up at the sky and I'm like, it's just not one thing visiting us. And if one kind of being has made it here, why haven't many? And the whole time travel thing, I mean, look at where we're headed. I always try to be positive, but I mean, I could see, God, I don't know, 100,000 years in the future, we might all be living underground. Everything might be, I mean, the whole AI, merging with AI, I don't even know if that's too far away, which
yeah,
there's some good aspects of that and a lot of terrifying aspects,
yeah.
obviously, for many
I'm more
reasons.
terrified by that, and I
Yeah.
mean, they're even saying that this new Chat GPT or whatever the heck it's called may eliminate tens of thousands of jobs, just
Yeah.
instantly.
Well,
you know,
yeah, and it's not a huge stretch to picture a reality, again, hopefully in the far distant future where the outside elements are just too harsh. We've either gone off planet or we figured out how to separate from our bodies, or we are in some sort of matrix kind of system that's our survival. And I always ask people, do you think time travel will ever happen? And most people go, well, yeah, eventually. And I'm like, well, then it's already here,
yeah,
right?
that's right.
So, I mean,
I used to
it's,
say something like that when I was a kid. I used to say, like, time travel will never happen because we don't see anyone, but maybe we are.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So I do think it'll happen eventually. And if it ever happens, then it is happening, and there's no reason why we might not go back into our own timeline for any number of things, genetics, samples, whatever we need, or just to observe. Who knows? So I think it just makes sense on so many levels, but I think it's only a small part of the story.
right. Right.
Can I tell you
And
something else interesting on time?
what's that?
I have another interesting time story if you're
Oh, yes, I'd love to hear it. Yeah.
okay, it's really quick. Well, I'll make it as quick as I can. That's hard for me. But Monroe Institute, where I've been studying meditation for a few years, highly recommend them for anyone that's interested in hardcore meditation. It's great. I had a really interesting meditation there where I was told by one of my guides, we were in it's called Focus 15, where they say that's like the level of no time. If you've been to Monroe, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This guide, we were talking about time. They say you can always come here and experience no time if you need to. I said, well, I know time is just this human construct. I know it's not real. And they were like, it is real. I was like, what? Because I thought I was so smart. First of all, I'm thinking, is this really my meditation? Because I should be in control. I have the thought that time is not real. But I was quickly corrected. And they said, on Earth, time is real because without it, you humans will not get your work done. But yes, in a way, time doesn't exist in these other areas. But in your human form on Earth, basically time is a real thing because you need it. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. So don't know if that makes sense, but I always like to share that little story. I came out of that like, maybe this meditation thing is real because that was not my thought.
Huh.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, we do tend to run out of our own time. Can't change that.
Yeah.
So another thing, you mentioned that you think that disclosure is already here. I mean, you're not the only one to say that. That's been on this show. A lot of people say, we've had this slow moving disclosure over the years, and I really, that part of it where people think that it would be so hard to come to grips with. I don't think that's going to be the case these days because of whatever we've had. Whatever it's been, I think that we have been gradually,
primed.
Yeah, that's the word, to accepting it. And I don't think it's going to change a lot if we do find out, unless there's problems.
It depends what we find out. I would say in general, humanity has just totally aced the test of, okay, there's things in our atmosphere we don't totally know what they are.
Yeah.
We're also distracted by everything else. Conspiracies aside, what's planned, what isn't, planned distractions versus natural stuff. We are pretty distracted and we're all just on our phones. And we're finally at a point where it's not that big a deal to say you've seen something in the sky. Nobody's going to lock you up for that anymore. It's going to be like, cool, have you got some video? You can go to work and talk about that. And you might only get a couple tinfoil joke hats at this point. So we've come a long way in that area.
Now, did you actually start talking about your interest in UFOs for several years, or has it been lately since, say, 2017, the New York Times article came out? People seem more relaxed about it since that time.
No, I came pretty far out of my UFO closet many, many, many years ago. But I didn't have a podcast or anything like that. But I started talking about it at work. I mean, like I was kind of known as the UFO girl, jokingly, For the last couple of decades with all my coworkers, all my friends. I mean, people have known me my whole life are like, oh God, you were talking about that when you were a kid. So I would say not a kid, but like in my teenage years, I started really opening up a lot more about that. In my 20s, by the time I got to my 20s, I would talk to anyone about it. I went on a date once. It was a set up, what do you call it? A blind date. A friend of mine wanted me to go out with this guy and we're all sitting around at dinner. I was, maybe 20, 21, something like that. And we started talking about UFOs and he apparently quickly lost interest and told his friend afterwards, like, well, I was kind of digging her until she started talking about UFOs. My friend was trying to explain to me, you can't just do that. And I was like, oh, yes, I can, because that's a repellent for me. If I can't immediately get into that topic and somebody hang with me, I don't even need to go on a second date with them. So no, I was always pretty open about that stuff. But I really think if, we ever see a president in the White House saying like, they're landing on the lawn, people are probably going to completely flip out. But basically, we've known now for many years, our government has admitted they never really stopped studying it. And, it's of great interest to them and they don't know everything that's flying around and us humans are handling it just fine. So I feel like in a lot of ways we've had disclosure. It's not exactly what I thought it would look like. But I'll bring this up too. I'd love your thoughts on this, or your viewers' thoughts. And that is just, sorry, I'm starting to lose my voice and I lost my train of thought.
Oh, aren't you going to be singing later tonight?
No, I don't have to. Where was I going with that thought? Oh, I hate it when that happens. I just squirreled on myself. I wanted your thoughts on, oh, it'll come back to me. I hate it when that happens.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on. I'll come back. I have so much
That's the
going on in my
beauty
head.
of doing a live show. When these things happen.
I'm drinking tea to keep my voice.
Yeah. So you're welcome to post, the people in the chat room. You can post your questions if you would like to. Just put them in caps. Someone wanted to know this question here. Do you still feel as though you can do this OBE?
And how far can I go? No, so that's a great topic to come back to. I'm trying really hard to get back to it. So when I was 9 years old, I was alone in the house. My mother had gone out. I used to play like I was sick all the time because I hated going to school. So I always wanted to be home. And I remember one day in the middle of the afternoon, I was laying in her bed, because that's another weird thing. I could never sleep in my own bed. That was a whole other weird thing. And I remember looking at her curtains. They started looking watery, like shimmering, like kind of like a mirage. And the feeling came over me again that I was going to go out of body. And it must have been a little while at that point since I remember doing it. And I panicked. And I remember just kind of throwing a fit and saying, I'm not going. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this anymore. And I just was like, no. And then it stopped and the curtains were still again and everything was really quiet. And I was like, I'm in control. This is amazing. I don't have to do this. Because at some point, I think it became a scary experience for me. It wasn't just flying through the house. There's something attached to it that I don't know. I'm not going to lie and even try to tell you that I've figured it out. At some point, I should probably do some regression. And, my guess is I have very broken memories. And at some point, it became a very scary thing for me. So I shut it down. And there's been a few times over the years when I've started to get that weird feeling again, and I just shut it down. When I was at Monroe, and I did not go to Monroe Institute to practice OBE. A lot of people go there trying to achieve that. That's not what I was there for. But one night, and I was just, I think, drifting off to sleep. I may have even been asleep for just a minute. And next thing I know, I was, I guess, out of body. I was looking down. If you've ever been, there's kind of like a lobby hang area, and there's like an open landing. You can look down on it. And I was looking down at everybody around the table talking that hadn't gone to bed yet. And all of a sudden the image went black and white. And it was almost like I was a security camera looking down on this. And I remember thinking, this isn't a dream. And I thought I felt kind of funny. And then in real life, I started shaking like when you go to like Home Depot and you get paint mix and they put them in those shakers and it's just like crazy. From head to toe, I could not, I'm not even going to try to show you what it looked like because I'd look like a crazy person. I couldn't repeat it if I tried. My body was shaking in a way that made no sense. Wow. And it scared me to death. And I shot up out of the bed and I was like, what's going on? But since then, I did have one other experience when I came back, maybe about a year after that experience, where I got it all the way up, walked in. This is interesting. I floated down through my mattress, not up. I always thought of OBE as kind of floating up and flying. I very slowly went through my mattress, which makes no sense, but I'm just telling you what happened. And I was like, this is not a dream. I'm 100% awake. And I remember thinking, don't panic this time. One of the things they teach you at Monroe is instead of panicking, because that pulls you out of your OBE, is to just say, this is interesting, and to just kind of breathe into it and see how long you can stretch it out. So I did that. I just went, this is interesting. And I got all the way down to the ground. I very carefully rolled over. I could feel the carpet fibers under my fingers. And I remember thinking, get up slowly. Got up slowly, walked to the bathroom. And my husband walked in to use the bathroom. I won't get gross here, but I sat and talked to him while he's just peeing in the middle of the night. And I remember saying to him, hey, I want to remember this. I need some kind of validation or some evidence to, take back with me from this experience. And he did this funny little thing. He held up his hand and then he was like, how many fingers am I holding up? but I couldn't see. And I was like, why are you playing a game with me? I need something solid for us to remember. And he was just acting really weird, kind of like he was half in a dream state. He gets back up to walk towards the bed, and I'm following him. And then we get closer to the bed. And of course, the lights are out, but you can see just a little bit at night.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, I realize we're both in the bed. And I start to think, I'm not sure he was the one I was just talking to. And then I was pretty sure there was something in the corner. I can't tell you what it was, but there was kind of like a little bit of movement, and there was something dark. Oh, I'm getting the chills. Something dark in the corner. And then I freaked out. And I started screaming. And then, of course, my husband woke up and was like, "You're just having a bad dream." I was like, "It wasn't a dream." So
That's pretty heavy duty.
yeah, no, it wasn't pleasant at all. Was there anything there that was I actually in any danger? I don't know. I talked to Angelia about it, and she's like, "Well, trust your gut." She's like, "When you go out of body, you have to do a lot of protection first. Those spontaneous out of bodies, you haven't had time to protect yourself, and anything can be floating around, and it could be good or bad or neutral." So that one kind of scared me, but I am trying really hard to get back into it and work on a method, that I can trust and just do a lot of protection with it. So that was a really long answer, but all that to say, yeah, I've had kind of a couple spontaneous ones that haven't gone totally great, but I really believe in it.
So this kind of, when this guy put this up earlier, but it kind of reminded you, said that whatever it was, put the fingers behind the hand, the remote viewing, they're asking if you've ever tried that.
Yes, and that was Christopher Deperno. I love you, Chris. I have tried a little bit of remote viewing. I don't think I'm all that
I
great
know
at
who
it.
Christopher is. Yeah.
Yeah. I was talking to Tracy Garbutt Dolan, she's pretty good at it. And she was kind of explaining, some of her methods and how she's strengthened that muscle. I don't feel like I'm great at that. I'd like to try a little bit more, but I'm really focused right now in meditation, trying to go to extremely deep levels. I get to where I slow my breathing down so much. Or probably if I was hooked up to medical equipment, they'd be like, "Come back." But I'm really trying to get to that point where I can kind of be without time and see what I can find in those areas. Really obsessed with that and just trying to get information. And remote viewing is great. If I try something a few times and I don't take to it, I figure there's so many other people that are great at that. I'm going to focus more on this area.
Sure. Another question that popped up here. What's your favorite UAP/UFO case? Do you have one?
Well, I am really drawn to abduction cases. I'm very passionate about experiencers and what they go through and how they process this information. I'm a little bit less of a nuts and bolts girl. I mean, nuts and bolts, I think we can all agree Phoenix Lights was a huge one. I don't know exactly what it was. I've had some thoughts that it could have been an experiment to see how thousands of people would react to seeing a huge craft, overhead for such a long period of time. Was it truly otherworldly, interdimensional, or just something government related? I don't know, because I wasn't there and I didn't see it. That's certainly historically speaking, in our lifetime, a really interesting one.
Right.
But Deb Jordan Cobble is a really good friend of mine. I absolutely love Deb Jordan, and Bud Hopkins, of course, started working with her was it in the 80s when he wrote Intruders, about Deb and her family and her abduction experience. And then I became friends with Deb later on. I love her so much. She's so beautiful. I miss her. I haven't seen her in person in a while. But she wrote a book not that long ago. I think I may have that. Let's see. Yes. Extraordinary Contact. She wrote this one a couple of years ago. I highly recommend everybody read that. If you're not familiar with her story, it's a wild one. And the reason I brought that one up is you've probably interviewed Deb, right? I'm sure you know Deb.
I have not. I think I might have reached out to her, or maybe I had someone, either that or someone suggested I have her on as a guest, but I have not had her on.
She is fantastic. And the great thing about Deb's story is just how it continued. A lot of people have that one event that happened to them years ago, but she continues to have very unusual paranormal events. And the other reason I'm bringing her up is her event, her experience was frightening. But she has come to such great peace with that later on in life. And that is what I need. I need more stories like that. Kathleen Marden as well. She's another one, of course, She's the niece of Betty and Barney Hill.
Yeah.
And she has really found her own way to take something that can be frightening. Abduction is frightening. And we had her on the MUFON WhatsApp show not that long ago. And she was talking about how in those moments she just out of, I've got nothing to lose, I'm going to just project love at these beings, like being sick of feeling afraid, just projecting love, and how the whole experience turned around for her. It became a completely different experience and a very, very positive one. So those are stories and cases that I really kind of get obsessed with. But yeah, I don't know. In terms of more the nuts and bolts sightings, I mean, obviously Roswell was huge, but we still don't know really what the heck went on there.
Right.
Pascagoula, that's a pretty wild case. What's his name in North Carolina? I'm fascinated by his story. Chris
Bledsoe.
Yes, Chris Bledsoe.
Yeah.
You've probably had him on a couple times, right?
I've had him on one time. I've reached out to him a few other times, and he hasn't been able to come on, but I've had him on. And by the way, Calvin Parker, I feel like he's been a friend for several years. He's not doing too well, so
oh no,
let's give some good thoughts out for him. Yeah, he's a real fun and nice guy.
He's a funny guy.
He's a riot. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun to talk to. I'm very sorry to hear he's not doing well. I'm gonna send him just a lot of love and power there.
Yeah. But yeah, that Pascagoula that is another really great one. I would have, if people have asked me what my favorite thing is, I'm right there with the Ariel school. I really still think that's one of the most important ones.
Yeah.
But everyone can have their favorites. I know no one asked me that question, but
well, and is that just for how many witnesses and
the whole thing about the school, and that it changed so many of their lives. It made such an impact on them, and how they were interviewed by John Mack right away, within a few weeks, and other people interviewed them right away, and how the teachers had the foresight to have them all do drawings. And by the way, Gunter Hoffer is going to be our guest next week, and he was there right away, right after that happened, within a week or so, I do believe. So he'll be our guest next week. But yeah, that's one of my favorite cases anyway. But there are a lot of really very interesting ones. And there's so much out there that it does frustrate me when I see CGI and people trying to hoax and things like that, when there's so many really good ones out there. And that's the tough part for anyone that's new and they're trying to understand, so they don't go down the wrong rabbit hole and start following someone that's scamming or whatever. That's a tough one to figure out exactly which way to go at the beginning.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because one thing that I keep talking to people about right now is like, I think this is a time when we really need to go inward. It's fun to look at pictures and go, is it real? Is it not? But I mean, my God, what's about to happen with technology? I mean, it's exponential. We can't even wrap our heads around what's about to go down. I've been messing around with some AI artwork. I had a project.
Yes, I have something. That artwork that you've done.
That's old school. That's just taking a picture and painting over it. And yeah, if you want to show those are
fun. I'll show that.
I got this little alien character that I like to put in kind of funny,
so this
funny
is for
scenarios.
fun, everyone.
Oh, is it the video? It might be loud volume. Just FYI.
I toned it down, believe it or not.
Okay.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Fun stuff.
I have so much fun doing those guys. I call it alienating, and I take like weird thrift store pictures and stuff and paint aliens in it. I have a lot of fun with that. But what I was going to say is, like, these days a real picture looks fake, a fake picture looks real. We can now do stuff with our, you can just speak a few words. And well, I think you can talk for about 30 minutes, and then that app can basically recreate you talking, saying anything. Gone are the days when you just Photoshop somebody to make them look like they did something they didn't do. I mean, we're about to blast into territory where I even wonder what it's going to do for our, like, oh gosh, like our criminal system, like how we're even going to prove or disprove things. Like it's about to go into the Wild West with technology. And so
I know, but you're just talking about like the deep fakes that they can do.
yes, I mean,
it looks just like someone talking. A war could start over that.
that's what I'm saying. This is a time, I mean, maybe it's too late for us. I hope not. I don't ever want to be that negative, but this is a time when we all need to go really deep into our own personal experiences. Was it real to me? Like, I think gone are the days where you just show someone a picture and be like, will you tell me if this really happened to me or not? It's like we have to be so aware of our own experiences and trust our gut. And whether it's through meditation or prayer or whatever's your thing, but like, if this is happening, you need to make a really deep connection that doesn't involve necessarily an expert anymore telling you what happened, because we're at that point now where I don't know how we're going to know, and that's really frightening, actually.
Yeah. And then when it comes to just the UFO topic itself, it's like now there's Skylink, and there's, all these different things that, people are, it's not going to be easier. The drones are getting more sophisticated and all that. And then whatever the government's going to be doing, it's going to be harder and harder to tell what's coming from elsewhere and what's coming, what's ours.
But I do think, and this might be where I was going earlier, wanting to get your viewers' thoughts. But when you have an experience, in the middle of the night, if there's a creature there or something like that, I don't know that I agree. There's some, I don't want to name names, but there's some researchers and ufologists that are like, oh, that's just government stuff, my lab, or what do they call it? I really don't think I'm that important. I really don't think anyone from the government is concerned about coming into my bedroom and scaring me in the middle of the night. I'm pretty sure I'm just not that high on their radar, I do think, because there's a lot of abductees that, they remember their encounter and they're like, there were humans dressed in military stuff. That's so strange to me. I don't, so are some governments involved in this kind of thing? Yeah, probably. I don't know. But I think we are at that point where it would be so easy to fake, something in the sky that millions of people see over hours and hours, and it could literally just be something fake. I think we are at that point of technology. We've probably been there for a long time. And so what does that mean for us? I think, one, we've got to quit turning on each other. We're so easily controlled when we're afraid, and we've all got to do our own personal work, to find our peace with this topic. And if we're being contacted, I think it just becomes a really personal thing, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that all makes total sense to me. I like this question from Christopher Miller. What was your most interesting interview, and why was it the most interesting interview?
Well, I guess they're probably talking about ufology.
No, I think they're talking about maybe the different people you've interviewed over the years. That's how I took it.
Well, okay, I'll go with a couple different answers. Dolly Parton, all day long, is just
I bet. Yeah.
Fantastic. Wasn't bad talking to George Clooney. That was kind of fun. Somebody who just popped into my head, I tried to go with like the first things that come into my head. On MUFON What's Up, we talked to Mike Cleland, and
he's coming up on this show in a few weeks. Yeah. Mike.
I love what he's doing. He just kind of walks in synchronicity, and that's a really big part of my life too. I know it is for you too, Martin. It's like, those are little place markers, I think, when you have weird deja vu, bizarre synchronicities, when you're just in that flow. And he talks all about that in his book, Messengers. And he's not just the owl guy. The owl thing comes up over and over and over again with him, but there's this wonderful, deeper message behind it. And it's all tied into ufology and paranormal stuff in general, and just human connection. I just really resonated with, I think I've read 2 of his books, but I feel like I think I've read 2 of them. Really, really enjoyed talking to him. So your guests are going to absolutely love that.
Yeah. A funny thing is, the first time I met Mike and talked to him or whatever, and I watched him speak, he was up in Maine at a conference that I was going to. And that morning, it was early in the morning, it was still dark out, right outside of my window. And the only time it ever happened was an owl hooting. And I had no idea that I was going to see this guy talk about owls the next day. So
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, it was just a weird coincidence,
I
but it was
feel
pretty
like I don't think he'd mind me saying this. I think it's actually a real compliment. I think he's somebody that is uh, being utilized in a really
fun.
interesting way. He is a messenger on this planet. He's waking us up to our own potential, and he's so humble. I
Yeah,
think he really just feels like the messenger. And he's very special. I've enjoyed everyone I've talked to.
yeah.
Yeah, I loved having you on the show. I mean,
Oh,
you've
yeah.
interviewed everybody, so you're like this walking encyclopedia of all things ufology, and
Well,
that's a great thing.
I'm just the armchair guy.
Well, I
um,
don't know. You didn't have you yeah, you've talked on your show about what you witnessed.
yeah,
Like,
I definitely had, yes, I definitely had a sighting. But I say this all the time because I think it's kind of funny. Is I had that was not the most exciting thing I've seen in the sky. I had a fireball that didn't even make any sense. That flew over me, and that was really you also. And this thing
yeah.
was perfectly round. It had cracks on it, sparks coming out of the cracks and rotating, and made no noise as it went right over my head. That was more bizarre than the UFO. Was just it was there and it moved and it stopped, and and it really was pretty amazing.
Mm.
But that was more dramatic. The fireball was much more dramatic. And it's funny, I talked about that on the show, and I said it was somewhere around 1985, 6, maybe 80, somewhere around there, 87. And someone called me from not called me, they wrote me from Canada and said their grandparents and described the same thing in the 1980s.
Okay. Well,
So,
mine was probably 87. I had it tattooed on my stomach, and if my stomach were still nice and flat and I had some abs, I would probably stand up and show it to you, but I'm not going to traumatize you. But it was inspired by this fireball, completely silent overhead. My friend Thomas was in the car with me. It was late. It was probably 2 in the morning. We'd been out having a good time, but I was driving, so I was sober. And it was like, I mean, I don't know. I guess like if a planet was going to crash into the earth, it was round and it had these flames coming out of it that was like, it kind of almost looked like rainbow colors, like purple and
wow.
red. And so maybe it's just something burning up into the atmosphere, but it was silent and it seemed so low. We were on
Yeah,
Belmont Boulevard in Nashville. The Belmont College was straight ahead. And I was like, we drove down the end of the road because I thought somehow it was going to crash,
I
and
did too. This
yeah,
is weird. What if it's the same thing?
maybe that's
Because it
why
was
I'm
about
wondering.
that year. It was about 80, and I'd say anywhere between 85 and 80. I know the house I owned and where I lived, and yeah, it was in the late 80s.
It was
So
crazy,
yeah,
and of course, what seemed overhead to us, again, when you're looking in the sky, it's like, it was right over my head. Obviously,
yeah.
if, like, half the
Seemed like it
world
was
was
right.
seeing it.
Seemed like I could have almost thrown a ball up to it or something,
Yeah,
a
that was
baseball.
crazy.
But yeah, it is. So here's another question here. I don't know if you've ever even thought about this.
Mm.
What do you think about the religious theory, that there are fallen angels? There are people that also say this could be demonic. There's the people that have that thoughts as well.
Yeah, human perception. I mean, if religion's a really big part of your life, then obviously everything can be painted through that. Possibly. I tell you what, I don't believe anybody that tells me 100% what they think is going on, because I think it could be all of the above. I think it could be a moving target. I think it could
Yeah.
change. I've had good and bad experiences. I've had, and I don't tell a lot of the details of the negative ones because I've got 3 kids and 2 of them are in high school, and I'm not going to do that to them. I think it's kind of weird
Mhm.
them out a lot. But I've had a couple experiences with entities that I felt in my gut were not good at all, and they were very, very frightening. I wouldn't say necessarily demonic, but I'm not terribly religious, so I don't filter things that way, but they were very negative. And I've also had a couple experiences that felt truly angelic. And again, I'm not religious, but I would have walked away with these beings and never come back. It felt that positive and loving. So I get the whole kind of good and evil comparison.
Mhm.
It could be
Mm.
us from the future. They could be coming from a million different planets. They could be interdimensional. They could be angels and demons. could be all of the above. And I think what really matters is what your experience is, what it means to you, and how you process it and how you handle it, because everybody's different and all of our experiences are a little bit different.
Yeah. Now we've only got a few minutes left, believe it or not. It sure goes really fast. You are writing a book. Are you writing a book? Did you say
Yes.
that?
Yeah,
And it's a fiction, right? Is that
it is. It's based loosely on some of my encounters and some of my thoughts about this, but it's going to be around the hybrid uh, topic, because I absolutely believe that's real. I don't think thousands of women all around the world having the exact same experience is just made up or some mass delusion. There are pregnancies that are there and then they go away, and then these abductions that happen later where they see, a child on a craft. I believe these women. And so I'm writing a story based on that. And it's coming together pretty well. That's another thing. I'm just trying to find enough time to get it done. But I hope by the end of the year to possibly have that ready to publish.
okay? And we have 3 minutes left. I'm wondering if you can fill us on real quickly. You grew up in what you thought was a haunted house?
Oh gosh, it's right around the corner from here.
Really? So, yeah.
Yeah. Cold spots. And even like totally normal adults that didn't believe in paranormal stuff at all would come into this house and be like, "Oh, what is up with this place?" It's
Really? Wow.
really spooky. And yeah, that I think maybe was when I started with my whole I can't sleep in my bed alone. And this is so mean. I'll make this quick, but I'm one of 3 kids. I'm the youngest. They used to send us upstairs. Everybody's around the fire watching Saturday Night Live or, Happy Days or whatever, and they would send us up by age. So I'd have to go upstairs in this spooky ass house all by myself. And then my brother would come up. He's in a different room. Finally, my sister would come up like an hour later. I'd just be sitting there for an hour like, I'm terrified.
Oh boy. Yeah.
So yeah, it was a really scary house. Graveyard right in the yard, little cemetery for the family that built the place, and it was spooky as hell. But that started my ghost hunting. That was young. We'll have to do another talk about that sometime, and I'll get my EVPs and I'm really into that, and I actually think it's all kind of related.
Yeah, you're not the first one to say that either. I've heard a lot of people say they think they're connected. There's a guy named Paul Eno that has a really good theory about that. I don't know if you know who he is.
I don't think so.
He does mostly. I think he does mostly like a radio show, but he's out there. But he thinks they're all connected.
Well, yeah. Anne Strieber, I know you got to go, but Anne Strieber used to read all those letters that went to Whitley, and a lot of people would see their dead loved one with the Greys.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, Katie, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much. And thank you, listeners, for putting up with me being a little ADD.
Yeah. No, really enjoyed it. Thank you. Take care. All right. All right, everyone. Goodbye over there at KGRA Radio. And for those of you that are hanging out here in YouTube and you haven't seen this encounter yet, it's really interesting. And it's by Carol Quine. I'm going to play it now. Okay, back by popular demand is our UFO encounter clips. And I was contacted. Actually, you were in the last show in the chat room. And I said, email me, right?
Yep.
So,
you did.
Carol Quine. And if you would, can you give us first of all, a little bit of your background and go right into the encounter, if you would?
Sure. I am an Air Force brat. My first 10 years of life were spent being raised on military bases, and I loved every minute of it, by the way. That wasn't a complaint. My dad died before he retired from the Air Force. My mother and I traveled up here to Maryland to meet my brother who got a discharge from the Navy, and we settled here. And I spent all of the rest of my life in the Baltimore area. I live in a suburb of Baltimore. I am 64 now. I've been in higher education for well over 30 years. I spent the last almost 30 years at Urban Community College in Baltimore City, where I teach mostly developmental writing, first-year college writing, vocational writing, skill classes to my students. So I don't have children because I always say that my students were more than enough for me to to, to deal with. They were my
Yeah.
children, yeah, no matter
Yeah.
what their ages. So yeah,
Uh-huh. All
yeah,
right. So, yeah, let's talk about this was just in December last year.
yeah. Very not so long ago. Very
Well,
recent.
before we get into that, what was your idea about UFOs prior to this happening?
I was what I call a resistant believer. I didn't, I believed that these things existed. And I have a strong suspicion that they aren't, made here, not made domestically, shall we say. um,
Hmm.
but I didn't want to believe it. I have real mixed emotions about this. I know that there are people in the UFO community who are flagging, wanting to flag these folks down or beings down and invite them in and so on. And I'm not so sure that's a great idea, given
Oh, mm,
cattle mutilations and everything else. I'm not completely convinced that these are benevolent beings. So that's
mhm.
mixed emotions, I guess, is how I would best describe it.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get into December of 2022.
Yeah. Um, I explained to you in the email that I sent to you describing the incident that I have a habit of falling asleep way too early in the evening and then waking up, like mid morning, like around 3 or 4 before the sun is up. And usually I'll, answer some emails and stuff. And when I get bored, I grab some coffee, grab the dog, and we traveled just down the road about, maybe a mile to a parking lot where there is a donut shop where lots of commuters are coming through or early morning traffic and stuff, so I feel relatively safe there. This one particular morning, I forgot to let my little dog down in the grass to relieve itself, and so I realized he was squirming a bit on the ride to the donut shop parking lot, and I thought, well, I'll just stop at this business park that I frequent where lots of dog walkers use the paths and so on and so forth. I thought it's always been safe, so I'll stop there and let him out. And so that's what I did. He started pulling me down the walk toward a really dark area, and I didn't want to go that far down and into the dark. So I picked him up, and as I was turning around with him, something caught my eye. And that something was, you've seen a street lamp before, the
Hmm.
tall street lamps, and you know how bright and white they are. This was
Mm,
brighter and whiter than anything I've seen before. And I
mm,
knew it wasn't the street lamp. And so I think deep down inside I knew what it was, but I went through like this little index card box in my mind. Is it a drone? Is it a helicopter? Is it a,
yeah.
are you hallucinating? And it wasn't any of that. It was something very different. So I thought, just in case this happens to be something, oh, I don't know, extraterrestrial, let me get into the parking garage. So I went into the lower level of the parking garage. It's one of those multi-tier things for businesses. And I flattened myself up against the wall and watched it. Um, and, I forgot to say that I had unfortunately parked my car a little too far away to get to and to get out of there. And when I did park my car, I left my cell phone in there. So I didn't have any means of communication, any way of telling time, any camera. And
Mm,
so I was left to just observe and to do a rough estimate of how long this all took.
yeah.
Um, I would say was probably 20 minutes. I'm not a great calculator here, but I think around 20 minutes. And I can tell you, I'm a practicing Catholic, and I tend to pray a lot. I do rosary and stuff. I have
Hmm.
never prayed as hard as I prayed in that parking garage.
Oh, wow.
I
Yeah.
was begging God, please make this thing go away. Please, I got to get out of here, and it stayed and stayed.
Now,
And
meanwhile, were people driving in and out of the garage? Did you notice
No,
that?
it was so early. This was really before they started to come in. I did see the area, neighbors, a townhouse development and a apartment complex. And so I did see one or two cars leave. I guess they were commuters
Yeah.
going into Washington or something. And I thought it was so funny. I watched one, and I think it was a guy. I could kind of see the profile. And he right underneath of it, he went right under it,
Uh,
and I thought, well, you didn't get sucked up into the craft, so maybe there's hope yet. I don't know.
and how did the dog react? Did he react at all?
You know, he didn't, and that amazes me because I do hear that sometimes animals, start to act
Yeah.
up when some,
Yeah.
but not mine. I mean, we're talking about the most placid poodle in the entire world. I mean, he just was looking around. He didn't know what was going on.
Okay. And so why don't you describe what you were looking at?
Well, when I saw it, it was interesting because it sort of glided into position. No
Mhm.
sound, no emissions, just that bright light. As it was gliding into position, and I didn't mention this to you in your email, I happen to remember later. It went over one of the businesses, the areas of the business park where there was some lighting, and so you could see underneath of the UFO or whatever this was.
Mhm.
And you could kind of see something under it, like there had something almost looked like a little bit of scaffolding or something there. But
Hmm.
I could tell that it was round. Um,
Mhm.
and as I said, very white, very bright. It just kind of moved over into position and just stayed, and no sound, no anything. Um,
Hmm.
interesting, interesting. Um,
So you were there about 20 minutes, and then the thing, what it you told me in the email. So why don't you continue what you saw happen?
Right, and I remember thinking, "Oh god, please don't let that shaft of light that you see in the movies, suddenly click," and guess what happened? The shaft
Yeah.
of light clicked on it, and I thought, "Okay, so this is the part in, like, one of those movies about UFOs where either aliens come down that shaft or you get sucked up into the ship," and I thought, "Oh god, I don't wanna go on any, intergalactic rides this morning. Please spare me."
So
And,
was it like a shaft of light that came down?
yeah, it wasn't straight, it kinda spread out, it
Yeah.
was almost triangular. In fact, part of it was the thing was sort of over the trees and also over a little lane there's a little area there. And so I know that I saw that shaft of light hit, go all the way down to the pavement on the lane. I saw
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
And I know why I saw it because I kept thinking, please don't let anything come off of this craft. I was looking to see if anything was going to be deposited.
Hmm.
Um, and then I guess I would estimate that maybe that stayed on about 5 minutes because I remember calculating what do I do if I see something? Can I run
Mhm.
fast enough? Because I hear these things are pretty fast. Um, but anyway, and then as fast as it came on, it clicked off. The light,
Hmm.
the UFO went dark. I stayed there for a few minutes thinking just because it's dark doesn't mean it's gone. But I didn't sense anything was still there. And so I made a run for it. I went to my car and got out of there.
Hmm. And so did you call the police right away?
I got to my original destination, which was the donut shop parking lot,
Mhm.
and I parked and isn't that a strange idea to call the police about a UFO? I mean, that
No,
just seems
because
so
that's what I
funny.
did. I
Did
did the
you?
same thing.
Oh,
Yes.
good. Good. I'm happy. I'm happy to hear that. So
I
I
didn't know
call
what to do. So,
Yeah, I
I
mean, who
mean,
do you call? I mean,
yeah.
so I called and a very nice young man answered the phone at this precinct and he didn't laugh at me. And I said, I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but here's what I just saw. I said, has anybody else reported it? He said, no, I think he said that there was a domestic disturbance or something that they had a call for, something like that. He said, that's all we've had this morning. He said, would you like to talk to somebody at the non-emergency number? I said, sure. And so a woman picked up the phone. She was sort of like, it was kind of like Dragnet. She was just the facts, ma'am. She was polite, but that's all she wanted.
Yeah.
And so I told her what had happened. And so she said, okay, thank you. And I said, well, wait. I said, I have something else to say. I said, I want to thank you for, not ridiculing me because I know that,
Mhm.
sometimes that happens. You think that there's a
Sure.
nut on the phone. And she says,
Yeah.
everybody who's called in about this has said the same thing. I said, wait. Everybody? She says, yeah. She says, other people have seen it. She said, but just not in your area. So it had been traveling through, evidently.
So tell me what the exact date of that was then.
What do you mean? The exact what?
December what?
December 10th.
December 10th.
2022. And I estimated I saw it around 6:30 in the morning. The sun had not come up yet.
The reason I'm asking that is to get an accurate date for anyone else that may watch this video and may have witnessed it or know someone. So now you go back to where you were when this happened, and tell us what you saw that made the light strange.
Yeah. I went back. I think it was the next day in the daylight. I'm no fool. I don't go back in the dark anymore. But I stood where I was in that parking garage, and I reenacted what had happened. And as much as I tried, I could not figure out how I saw that shaft of light because the trees would have blocked it.
So the trees where it was, but how would you judge how far away it was from you? That would be very difficult.
I did a rough estimate, and I figured it was about 2/10
Just a
of a
goodbye.
mile. Around
So
that
if
distance.
it was indeed that far away, then it would almost seem impossible you'd see the light shaft go to the ground or the whole craft.
Yeah.
Are you saying the whole craft or just the light going?
I saw what I saw that morning was everything. Now, I mean, I saw the craft, I saw the light, et cetera, et cetera. I saw the light hit the pavement.
Yeah.
But when I went back, I could see how I could have seen the craft because obviously it was elevated, but I don't see how I saw that light. I could see how I could see it coming out of the craft, but I can't see how I saw it hit the ground.
That's it. Thank you so much. And if you yourself have had an interesting encounter, I'd love to have these little clips. I like to keep them to about 15 minutes or so. Please contact me at martin@podcastufo.com, and we'll get a conversation going and see if everything works for one of those clips as well. Thank you so much, everyone. And again, we have Gunter Hoff on next week, and it should be a very interesting show. Remember to keep your eyes to the sky.